The scent of lilies still lingers in my memory. Sweet, soft, almost too perfect. I stood just outside the church doors, my fingers clutching the bouquet so tightly my knuckles turned white. But my heart? Oh, it was light, overflowing. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I was minutes away from marrying the man who promised me forever. I remember my mom brushing a strand of hair from my cheek, whispering, "You're beautiful." I believed her. Inside, everything looked like a dream. Candlelight flickered against the marble columns, the music swelled, and the guests, all eyes on the door, were waiting for me. I could almost feel his gaze from the altar. I pictured his smile, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he saw me, and just as I took my first step forward, the doors behind me slammed open. The music stopped, people gasped, and there she was. She walked right past me like I didn't exist. Same white dress, but hers screamed drama, tight, loud, like she wanted to own the room. Veronica. I knew her name before I ever saw her face, but nothing prepared me for that moment. When she looked at me, eyes glinting with something cruel, and then turned to him. With a smirk so twisted it chilled my spine, she said it. Loud, clear, and cruel. He would never marry a slut like you. For a moment, I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there, frozen in that white dress I had dreamed about for months, now feeling like a costume in someone else's nightmare. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the murmurs around me. I looked at him, my fiancé, expecting, begging, for a reaction, a word, a denial, anything. But he just stood there, still, silent. His face unreadable, like he was watching a scene he'd already seen before. That silence broke something in me, not just my trust, but something deeper. Something I didn't even know could snap. It wasn't just humiliation. It was betrayal, raw and jagged. Every step I took backward felt heavier than the last, like the whole world had shifted beneath me. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage I hadn't even realized was there. All the whispers behind me turned into a single roar in my head. Get out! Get out now! So I turned. I didn't wait for explanations or pity. I couldn't bear their eyes on me, their shock, their confusion, their judgment. I pushed open the church doors and stepped into the sunlight, blinking back tears that refused to fall. My dress dragged behind me, beautiful and ruined, like a fairy tale burned at the edges. And as I walked away, I didn't just leave the ceremony. I left behind who I was before that moment. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something else entirely. I don't even remember how I got home. One minute I was in that church, surrounded by roses and stained glass, and the next I was in my bedroom. Makeup smeared, veil ripped, dress crumpled like a forgotten napkin on the floor. I stared at myself in the mirror for what felt like hours. My face looked like someone else's, like a ghost had crawled under my skin. The silence was unbearable. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that screams when no one else will. I replayed it over and over in my head. Her voice, that smug little laugh. His silence. That was the part that haunted me the most. Not the betrayal, not the scene, but the silence. How could someone who claimed to love me watch me break and say nothing? Not a word, not a gesture. Like I was disposable. Like I never mattered. And the worst part? A tiny pathetic part of me still wished he'd call, that he'd explain, that maybe this was all just a nightmare. But the truth settled in my chest like ice. This wasn't a dream. This was real. And something inside me started to shift, slowly, quietly, like a flame catching the edge of dry paper. I wiped the mascara from my cheeks, stood up straighter, and looked at my reflection one more time. No more tears, I whispered to myself. Because deep down I knew this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of something else. They say when your heart breaks, you see everything more clearly. I don't know if that's true, but in the quiet that followed the chaos, memories started coming back in pieces. like fragments of glass scattered on the floor. I remembered the first time I met him. He smiled like he already knew me, like we were meant to happen, and I fell, fast, hard, and without caution. He made me believe in forever, in safety, in promises wrapped in warm hands and late-night phone calls. He used to whisper things in my ear like, "I'll never let anyone hurt you," and I believed him, foolishly, like a girl who'd never been lied to before. We made plans, honeymoon destinations, baby names, how we'd grow old on a porch swing somewhere. I built my life around his words. And now, looking back, I see the cracks I ignored. The nights he was too tired to talk. The moments when he flinched at the sound of my phone buzzing. The way he said "trust me" too often, like he knew I had reasons not to. And then there was her, Veronica. The name I pretended didn't make my stomach twist. The ex he called crazy, needy, done. But I remember the way he'd shut down every time she came up, like there was a version of the story he wasn't telling me. I saw the red flags. I did. But love has this terrible way of painting red into rose. And I just wanted to believe I was enough to make him forget whatever came before me. It started with a message. Just one. Hidden in the folder where I wasn't supposed to look, but something told me to. A photo. A kiss. A date that lined up a little too perfectly with the night he told me he was working late. My breath caught in my throat as I scrolled through them. Screenshots, messages, pictures that told a story I never signed up for. Each click was like a punch to the gut, proof that I had been nothing more than the other woman in a game I didn't know I was playing. And she wasn't gone, not even close. Veronica had never left. She was still in the background, like a ghost he never stopped believing in. I saw photos of them at a beach I'd never been to, laughing like the world owed them nothing. The worst part? The way he looked at her, the same way he used to look at me, like she was gravity, like he couldn't help it. And suddenly I realized, maybe he never truly left her. Maybe he just paused us until she came back. The heartbreak didn't hit like a tidal wave. It crept in quietly, like fog. And then something inside me shifted again. But this time, it wasn't sorrow. It was sharp, controlled, cold. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to beg. I wanted to understand. I wanted to watch. I wanted to know just how deep the lies went. Because in that moment, I knew I couldn't just move on. No, that would be too easy. What I needed was something else entirely. Something that would make them both regret ever thinking I was weak. I didn't cry that night. Not once. I sat at the kitchen table in my robe, lights off, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. My phone was still open, the images frozen on the screen like a punchline I hadn't seen coming. But instead of curling into myself like before, I felt this strange stillness take over me. Not numbness. Focus. A kind of silence that comes just before the storm. That's when I whispered to no one in particular, "They don't get to win." I started collecting everything. Messages, receipts, photos, even whispers from mutual friends. I became someone else entirely. Not the sweet bride-to-be with hope in her eyes, but the woman who watched everything like a hunter in the dark. I remembered a friend of his, Daniel. Quiet, awkward, always looking at me with pity when no one else did. He messaged me out of the blue, said he was sorry, said he'd seen it coming, said maybe he could help. And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. This wasn't about jealousy. This wasn't about pain. It was about truth, about making sure they felt every ounce of what they'd done to me. Publicly, unmistakably. No more behind closed doors lies. I wanted their masks to fall the same way mine had, and I knew then, without hesitation, I wasn't going to disappear quietly. No. If they thought I was broken, they hadn't seen anything yet. I started waking up with purpose. No more staring at the ceiling, asking, why me? That version of me didn't survive the church door slamming shut. This new version? She took notes. She studied every lie, every move they made like it was choreography, and I was preparing for the final performance. I kept smiling in public, laughing even, letting people believe I was healing. But behind closed doors, I was digging. Quietly. Methodically. Daniel became my shadow. At first, I didn't trust him. Why would I? But something in his voice felt different. Honest, tired, maybe, of pretending everything was fine. He told me things I didn't want to hear but needed to. How Veronica had been pressuring him too, cornering him for information, keeping tabs on everyone. How she and my ex weren't just lovers, they were planners, plotters. And what happened at that altar? It wasn't spontaneous, it was scripted. Designed to humiliate me. That's when I stopped asking how they could do this and started asking when I would make them pay. I kept every message Daniel forwarded me, every screenshot he could dig up. Photos, voice notes, even old texts where she joked about watching Ruth crumble like a China doll. The pieces were fitting together now. This wasn't just betrayal, this was cruelty, dressed up as chaos. And I was done being their punchline. Forgiveness is such a beautiful lie. People kept telling me, "You'll feel better once you let it go." But they didn't see what I saw. They didn't hear the way Veronica laughed, or how he looked away like I didn't deserve even a sliver of dignity. So I smiled. I let them think I was healing, rising, moving on. I even posted an old photo of me and him with a caption that read, "Some people are just lessons." The comments poured in, sympathy, support, and underneath it all, strategy. I reached out to her, Veronica. Just a simple message. "I think we should talk, woman to woman." She didn't respond right away, but when she did, her arrogance poured through the screen. She thought I wanted closure, thought I was crawling back for crumbs of understanding, and I let her believe it. I told her I wasn't angry anymore, that maybe we'd both been misled, that maybe, just maybe, I was willing to put the past behind us. It was the easiest lie I've ever told. Because behind that calm voice, that gracious tone, I was working, planning, practicing. Every word I said was a seed, every smile a distraction. They thought I was some fragile little flower that had finally wilted. But the truth? I was just taking root, growing under the surface, waiting for the right moment to bloom. And when I did, they wouldn't see petals, they'd see thorns. I started setting the stage, quietly, deliberately. The charity gala was coming up. The one Veronica had plastered all over social media like it was her crowning moment. A night of elegance, donations, champagne, and secrets. I RSVP'd through a mutual contact, made sure my name wouldn't raise alarms. I even found the perfect dress, fitted, sleek, the kind that made people whisper. I wanted her to see me and feel the shift in the air, the tension, the warning. Daniel and I rehearsed every detail. He'd distract the security near the AV booth. I'd slip the USB into the system. One click, and everything they'd hidden, texts, audio, bank transfers, even that one damning video, would light up the screen behind their polished speeches. I wasn't just going to expose the affair. I was going to show everyone who they really were when no one was watching. It wouldn't be revenge in rage. It would be truth in spotlight. The night before the event, I stood in front of the mirror, the same one where I'd once collapsed in tears. But this time, I saw someone else looking back at me. Stronger, steadier, smiling, not with joy, but with clarity. I messaged Daniel just one sentence. If they wanted a show, I'll give them a finale they'll never forget. And I meant every word of it. The venue sparkled like something out of a fairy tale. Chandeliers, champagne, the buzz of laughter that didn't quite reach anyone's eyes. I stood outside for a moment before walking in, adjusting the bracelet on my wrist like it was armor. Funny how the world could look so polished while hiding so much filth underneath. As I walked through the grand entrance, heels clicking on marble, heads began to turn. And when Veronica saw me, her smile faltered, just a flicker. But it was enough. She recovered fast. Of course she did. She laughed too loudly, clutched his arm a little tighter, like I was some awkward ghost from a past she'd already buried. But I didn't come to haunt her. I came to bury them. I made my way through the crowd like I belonged there. Because I did. more than they ever would. Daniel gave me a subtle nod from the far side of the room. Everything was in place. All I had to do was wait for the moment. I made small talk, posed for a few pictures, even toasted to their love. The irony wasn't lost on me. I watched her give a speech, full of fake warmth and polished lies. She thanked everyone for coming, smiled sweetly, and leaned into him like they were royalty. And then, my cue, Daniel signaled. The lights dimmed, the screen behind them flickered to life. And as the first message appeared, I stepped forward slowly, every eye now turning toward me, toward the truth. The first slide was simple, a screenshot. His name at the top, a message below. I'll make sure she never sees it coming. The room went silent, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. People leaned in, confused, curious, until the second image appeared, and then the third. The laughter stopped. Murmurs started. I watched Veronica's face as her smile dissolved into panic. He tried to step in front of the screen, but it was too late. The truth was unraveling in real time, and they were center stage. Photos, bank statements, audio, their secret messages on burner accounts. Even a voice recording of her mocking the wedding day, laughing about my tears, calling the whole thing a public performance. Someone near the front gasped. I didn't flinch. I kept walking forward, slow and calm, like I was gliding through water. When I reached the microphone, my heart wasn't pounding. It was steady, focused, controlled, just like I needed to be. Thank you all, I began, my voice clear, every syllable deliberate, for witnessing not just a celebration, but a revelation. I looked right at them. You see, what we celebrate in public often hides rot underneath, but not tonight. Veronica took a step toward me, eyes wild, but stopped when another message hit the screen. One she had sent, one she thought would stay buried. I raised the glass in my hand, not to toast, but to finish the sentence. Tonight, the masks come off. The silence after that felt different, heavier. People weren't just shocked, they were changed. I could see it in their eyes, friends, colleagues, business partners, all suddenly unsure of the people they thought they knew. Veronica stood frozen, her mouth slightly open like she wanted to scream, but nothing came out. And him? He didn't even try to defend himself, just stood there, shrinking with every passing second, like the truth was too loud to speak over. I took a deep breath and let my gaze sweep across the room. Not with rage, not with revenge, but with something cleaner, clarity. You tried to destroy me, I said, my voice quiet but sharp enough to cut glass. But you only reminded me of who I am, and who you'll never be. The room was silent. No one clapped, no one moved, the kind of stillness that follows lightning when everyone's too stunned to breathe. I didn't need applause. This wasn't a performance, it was closure. I stepped away from the mic without looking back. No dramatic exit, no tears, just me, whole, stronger than I'd ever been. I didn't need to see their faces anymore. I'd seen enough. As I walked through the crowd, people parted like water, not out of fear, but respect. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward something they could never touch. The days after the gala were quiet, but not empty. The silence felt earned this time, like the world was catching its breath. Their faces were everywhere. Headlines, blogs, whispered conversations. The charity board dropped them. A few sponsors pulled out. Friends vanished, like shadows at sunrise. I didn't need to say a word. The truth had already done the talking. And me? I sat in a sunlit cafe, coffee in hand, finally at peace with the sound of my own thoughts. There was no joy in their downfall, not really. Just release, like something heavy had been lifted from my chest. I didn't need them to suffer. I needed to stop suffering for them, for what they did, for what I let myself believe. The pain hadn't disappeared, it just transformed, into strength, into clarity, into space where something better could grow. And slowly, day by day, I started to fill that space. With me. I began sketching ideas again. Business plans I'd shelved while planning our wedding. Things I thought I couldn't do unless I had someone beside me. Turns out, I was the only one I needed. I reached out to a few mentors, pitched a project I'd been dreaming of for years, a space for women like me, women who had been burned, blindsided, broken, and came back stronger. I didn't want to be remembered as the girl left at the altar. I wanted to be remembered for what came after. People started reaching out. Women I hadn't spoken to in years. Strangers who'd heard what happened and whispered, "Thank you." They shared their stories, different faces, different names, but the same thread of betrayal, of rebuilding. And somehow, every time I listened, I felt less alone. I wasn't just healing, I was connecting. Something bigger was happening, something that wasn't about revenge or exposure. It was about rising, together. I poured myself into the project. Long nights, early mornings, a kind of energy I hadn't felt in years. But it wasn't driven by pain anymore. It was powered by purpose. I rented a small space in the arts district, painted the walls soft gold, and put up a sign, "Reclaimed." A place for women to walk in as they are and leave as they're meant to be. Coaching, support, workshops, laughter, stories. It became more than I imagined. It became mine. There were moments, of course, when the past tried to tap me on the shoulder. A song, a memory, a name mentioned in passing. But I no longer turned around when it did. I didn't owe those ghosts anything. Not my tears, not my time, and certainly not my power. I had learned the hardest truth of all. Closure isn't something they give you. It's something you claim. The first time I walked past the church again, I didn't flinch. I didn't speed up or cross the street. I just walked, head high, heels clicking on the same sidewalk where everything fell apart. But this time, I didn't feel broken. I felt free. Not because it didn't hurt anymore, but because I had learned to carry the weight without letting it define me. That church wasn't my ending, it was my turning point. Now, when people ask about that day, I don't hide. I don't soften the edges. I tell the truth, because the truth is what set me free. I tell them I was betrayed, that I was humiliated, that I thought I'd never come back from it. But I did. Not just as the woman who survived it, but as the woman who built something because of it. I'm not ashamed of what happened. I'm proud of what I did with the wreckage. So I leave you with this, because maybe you've been broken too. They thought breaking me would be the end of my story. Turns out it was just the prologue.